They did not come here for food, this man says. They came because of fear. But if they can't get food, they have to leave. If you're hungry, you can live for a few days. But if you're in the middle of a war, you might get shot anytime. Sri Lanka is known as one of the most beautiful countries in the world. But during the last 2 decades, the country has had to face a serious and complicated problem with a large number of internally displaced persons caused by armed conflict and the Indian Ocean tsunami of December 2004. The film crew has visited several sites in Galle and Trincomalee district. In Galle, we were able to freely visit the camps whenever we wished. In Trincomalee, we only got access once, during a 3-day-long visit in the beginning of June 2006. After that, Trincomalee has become one of the most affected districts in the war-like situation Sri Lanka has been sliding into. Every organization or agency working with camp management in Sri Lanka must have governmental approval. The Norwegian Refugee Council has had a special role in this situation. After the tsunami, 57,000 shelters were spread around in different districts on the island. It was an urgent task to train staff members and others who are responsible for these sites in camp management. And this training has been NRC's responsibility. The objective of this film is to show how different the stories of displacement can be, even within a small country. This is a site where the location was miscalculated from the beginning, and most of the tsunami IDPs living in this camp have left it by now. In camp management, the most important question that has to be asked from the day a camp is planned to the day it is closed is how do we ensure that people get what they need and have a right to. This is the key rationale for a training program in camp management. Camp management is based on dignity, respect, and upholding the rights of the displaced, and on understanding the refugees and internally displaced persons' experience. But the approaches and activities and the tools used in camp management are context-specific, as this film will show. The distance between Galle and Trincomalee is short, but the situation for the IDPs is in many ways totally different. We will now explore these differences in the most important subcategories within camp management, namely roles and responsibilities, protection, camp development, community participation, coordination. The NRC staff has full access to all the 25 sites NRC is responsible for in Galle district. The work with training programs, data collection, and care and maintenance is well planned and implemented.
Camp management, by its nature, is non-prescriptive. It's always based on the specific local context in which it occurs. So, for example, my work in Galle district has been completely different to the work that's been implemented in camp management in Trincomalee.
Armed conflicts in Trincomalee district have forced many civilians to run away from the fighting. This new situation has affected NRC's work in the district. The roles and responsibilities of a humanitarian agency will always depend on the situation, environment and mandate with which it works.
Given the escalation of violence, particularly in my area of responsibility being the East and the North, that we've actually had to go into a site monitoring role where site management trainers have now actually been placed on the ground amongst displaced people to be the eyes and ears of the issues that are happening at the site level, to feed back current snapshots of data and information back to NGOs who are then in a position to be able to respond to the needs of the people.
This NRC staff member explains what they're doing in the new monitoring role. They're registering people and asking them about why they have come, what they have brought with them, and what they need. They collect data during the day and log the information during the night. The information is sent to the head office and distributed to other NGOs and UN agencies for further action. This NRC monitor says that they work 5 days a week to help people, if necessary, all week through, from early morning to late night. Some of the most serious and complicated challenges NRC has had to face in Trincomalee district are connected to protection. The recent and intensified levels of fighting have forced the people in many camps and villages to run away to areas they believe are more secure. This spontaneous built-up tent camp in the southern parts of Trincomalee district is one of the places people are fleeing to. As in armed conflicts all over the world, the civilians suffer most. Everyone we talked to in this camp told us basically the same story about fighting breaking out close to or even within the area where they were living, about houses being destroyed during the fighting, and about how they had to run away as soon as possible, leaving everything behind.
On the subject of protection, one of the most important instruments NRC uses here in its operations in Sri Lanka is UN OCHA's 1998 Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement. This instrument reflects and is consistent with international human rights, international humanitarian law, the analogous refugee law. It serves to define the rights and guarantees on the part of the IDPs, but also the obligations of the local authorities.
Basically, protection issues in the North and East are still very centered around human security. So very poor civil-military relations, lack of trust between authorities and civilians, and the abuse of authority power towards civilians is a big issue. Definitely gender-based violence and abuse of alcohol is something that we see repeatedly in sites. And probably the most serious that I feel in terms of site management is the use of sites by alternative groups and authorities to recruit and mobilize people into violent activities is probably one of the largest issues we're seeing right now.
When it comes to protection in our operations, probably the best technique that we could use is undertaking the idea of protection by presence. And that means our staff members have to be out and in contact with the communities affected by the natural disasters or the conflicts, so that we really understand what are the issues that they're dealing with, and also it affords them an opportunity to feel more protected because they have the presence of an international NGO with them.
This Tamil village leader says that because of the monitors they feel safe. He says you can tell the world about all their problems. They would like to go back. They can walk on the streets here, but not at home. Until the time gets better, he added, NRC can talk to other people about their problems. This woman from Trincomalee district is talking about the shortage of rice, food, milk powder and medicine in the camp. Some of the children are sick, but they can't get medication. The tents they're living in are old and uncomfortable. It's not good to live here. If protection is given, they say they will go home. The presence of armed forces in the camps increases the vulnerability of the IDPs. A few days after the film crew left Trincomalee district, it was announced that military trainings in self-defense had been arranged in the camps we had visited. The IDPs in the camps were probably not in a position where they could refuse to participate in these trainings. But the worst thing is that such activities put the IDPs at risk, since it can be used to consider even IDP camps as military targets.
On the subject of protection, again, to kind of round up my final thoughts, I think probably the most important aspect that we need to ensure right now is access to the affected communities and to have sufficient humanitarian space in which to work.
Site selection and design is the first crucial step in camp development. All humanitarian agencies are doing their best to get people in the camps resettled as soon as possible. But many factors might force the inhabitants in a camp to stay there much longer than anybody wants. Care and maintenance is therefore often the longest lasting stage in camp development. The lack of plans and resources for this long-lasting stage can become a major problem for established camps.
The experience in camp management that we have seen in Sri Lanka is a great departure from what many agencies have experienced in other places. Here in Sri Lanka, because we have so many small camps, we haven't seen the development of a central administration of a camp that could coordinate the different service providers that would be interested in delivering services. It was more of an impromptu or an ad hoc arrangement, site by site, that the people living there really responded to and happily accepted whatever was provided.
So what's going on here, Sean, after care and maintenance? Can you tell me a bit about this place?
Well, we have it's a small Muslim community,
yeah.
Approximately 14 families.
Okay.
They're occupying mosque land.
Okay.
We came in and did a program of care and maintenance for them,
yeah.
After they've been living pretty much independently without any outside agency assistance, okay, for 12 months.
Okay, so an external agency came in, built the shelters, and then the community was completely self-managed?
Yeah, the agency that built the shelters were purely doing that, just building shelters.
Okay.
This is the Muslim site leader. He and his family lived here, but only the foundation of their former house is left. 570 Muslims in this area were killed during the tsunami. He told us that only NRC has helped them and trained him in camp management. They asked us how we were doing and what we needed. When you come to help us, you must work together with us. We will also participate. Next month, he says, we will be moving to our new houses. 14 families. The mosque is giving us houses.
The first thing to say in relation to camp development is that we don't actually want the camps to be there in the first place. Designing a camp, building a camp, having a site of displaced people living in a very vulnerable situation is a last resort. It's something that's set up when all other alternatives have been explored and people simply need somewhere to be where they can be safe and where their basic human rights can be met.
This site in Trincomalee doesn't follow the usual steps in camp development. Most of the IDPs should have been living in new houses by now. But the buffer zone problems, transportation restrictions and other obstacles have delayed the resettlement process. Many of the IDPs are therefore still living in transitional tsunami shelters. In addition to this, many new IDPs are coming to the camp because of the armed conflicts in the district. To conclude, All the three stages in camp development seem to live their own life within this site. All kinds of work went on when we visited this camp, and all the activities we could observe seemed to be well planned and prepared. Free access to do what is needed and predictable working conditions make it a whole lot easier to work with camp development in Galle than in Trincomalee.
6 weeks ago, the agency who built this site pulled out. And that's what happens in a lot of these sites, particularly because we're now quite a way past the tsunami. Agencies are increasingly leaving sites without care and maintenance facilities. So NRC was able to adopt this site and take it over, which was particularly important at the beginning of the rainy season.
We adopted this site 4 weeks ago, and we've been working on site for approximately 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The first week was some initial assessment. We discussed with the site community what their needs were, what they wanted us to do in order of priority, and how they could mobilise the community to help us with the work.
To get the work done.
And what that does is it has allowed us to involve community members in the majority of the works that are going on here. There is some specialist work happening. We're doing some quite complicated drainage work and some fairly involved carpentry. What we do is, if there's a skill shortage within the site, we will supplement on-site labour with outside skilled labour. The skilled personnel directed to work alongside the local teams, and that way they can share their skills and the community gets some skills training. Hopefully, the idea is that after we leave a community that's better able to take care of its care and maintenance needs.
The leader in this site has also been trained in camp management. He says that NRC is a very respectable organization. And NRC are the people who are doing something good for them. They have spoken to them about their needs and given them work so they could solve their problems together.
NRC always strives to harness the energy that these communities certainly have. There might be a misconception out there that people affected by war or natural disaster, even at the great magnitude of the tsunami or the recent conflicts, are rendered helpless. But we certainly don't agree with this. People have a lot of energy, a lot of commitment, a lot of self-respect that we can capitalize on.
Why is community participation so important? Because internally displaced persons are forced into camp situations where they are increasingly vulnerable and potentially highly dependent. Community participation is a strategy to reduce vulnerability and dependency.
The whole notion of community participation is that we needed to, as a project, working directly with people, we needed to remind them of what their life was like before the tsunami. That people did live in poverty before the tsunami, and in the north and east we had displaced people before the tsunami. So taking them back to a time in their memory where they remembered how they solved their own problems.
It is also Kelly's experience that psychosocial traumas make community participation more complicated. To understand the cultural context is another challenge. If the social and political ranking in a camp is unknown for an aid agency, it is also making the work with community participation difficult.
Community participation is basically about putting people back in charge of their own lives. So one of the things that we first try to do, working with the community in training sessions, is to get them to think about what's in it for them if they start to participate in the process of their own development and in the maintenance of their own site.
The people in this camp are talking about how the students in the camp can be supported so they can participate in the school team in sport. But where do you start before you arrange a committee meeting like this? NRC started by training the trainers and gives them responsibility for the training of others. One of them is Judy.
And who did you train at district level? Who were the district level workshops for?
Colombo, Galle, Hambantota, Matara, and Kalutara.
And who were the participants?
Government officers and NGO, INGO officers, site level people.
Coach at the community meeting told us that these are our country's people and they have a lot of talent. We have been in 20 camps in 2 months and we are not working on behalf of but together with the people in the camps. We want to let them express their problems and while they're doing so, they find the solutions. She says coaching and training is a good concept for the whole country. This woman says that she is happy with the work NRC has done in the camp. She says that they had no idea of their rights and how to communicate them earlier. But through coaching and training, they know it by now. They have organized voluntary cleanup work and now they're working together to get toys and sporting equipment for their children. Even if everyone is longing for the day when they can move to permanent houses, they take good care of their camp. They're doing their best to build up the joys of their present home life, and community participation has helped them in doing so. Coordination plays an important role in camp management at all levels. On a district level, NRC in Galle has a weekly meeting where staff members share information and coordinate their work. On a national level, NRC became a rather huge organization in post-tsunami Sri Lanka.
One of the challenges of coordination within the Galle district has been the sheer number of players on the ground, the sheer number of agencies and stakeholders who flooded in after the tsunami to bring assistance and help to these communities. Now, coordinating that sort of complexity of actors was the most enormous task. It's very easy for meetings to be a place where information is shared and where everybody tells everybody else what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are coordinating or collaborating very well to ensure that services aren't duplicated or that gaps are filled.
In Trincomalee district, there were already NGOs working there in conflict or post-conflict situations. So because of that, because there was a history there of response, particularly after the ceasefire agreement, then we did have the piling up and the duplication of NGOs coming in a post-tsunami response, being butted up against people who are already working there in a conflict response. So I think there were coordination issues. I think people tried to do the best they could in the time they had. I think the tsunami put coordination on the top of a discussion list like no other time has. And I feel a little ill-prepared to start to judge coordination or lack of coordination, because I think the humanitarian response after the tsunami was so large and so unprecedented that I feel like we need to reflect on that experience for some time to get our learning from that.
And what was the reason why not going to a camp?
In IDP situations, some of the IDPs always find their own individual solutions. This lady stayed in a camp that is now almost deserted. She says she went back after the tsunami. Others followed her. She was one of the first to leave after only 3 months in the camp. When asked if she is not afraid to live so close to the sea, she answers, "Afraid of the sea? Why should I fear? I don't want to run away to the forest or anywhere else. There's fish in the sea. They can live here. Life is easier here, better than other places." Everyone will die one day, and for me, it will be here. Many others are now resettled after the tsunami displacement. Among them are the former Muslim site leader and his family. He says that life is much easier here. They're going to work and they're happy now. We have a new house and our old problems are left behind, he says. His wife tells us that the government helped them with shelter and gave them what they needed after the tsunami, both clothes and other things. It was a very happy day when the family could move into their new house. The family still has to face some problems, such as one of their children being sick, or few possibilities for work, which in periods gives them a rather limited livelihood. But these are everyday grievances compared to the hardship they had to face during the last 2 years. Many IDPs are still not resettled after the tsunami. And the fighting has created more than 200,000 new IDPs. Camp management services will probably be needed in Sri Lanka for years to come. And since camp management is quite a new discipline for many actors who have been in charge of camps in one way or another, we are left with two important questions. What are the most important lessons learned? Where do we go from here?
What we've appreciated very much with NRC's role is actually combining or being involved in two different roles. One was very much the camp management, training the people, the local authorities, the humanitarian actors in camp management, but also NRC was taking very much an active role in care and maintenance and actually knowing what were the problems in the camps, how to address them, shelter problems, water sanitation problems, livelihood problems, and addressing them basically gave NRC much more strength and rapport with the people coming to the training courses and really helped them to develop training courses that made a difference. And very much that combined role in our view has been working very well.
For me, camp management is about understanding that displaced people can be and are highly functioning individuals. That for me is fundamental. Camp management also needs to give a voice to people who are displaced. While giving a voice to them, giving them support, be it soft skill support or technical or hard skill support. And to me, it's that essential marriage between the soft side and the hard skill side, but allowing displaced people to be active in whatever their capacity can be to decide and determine what their existence at their time of displacement or during displacement can be. And those need to be grounded in very rich and well-defined humanitarian principles around respect for human rights, respect for international law and standards, and based on dignity and giving people dignity in their displacement experience.
What I find so valuable about camp management is that it has a very holistic approach to the issue of displacement. And it sees that for any displaced community, it's not only the technical issues that need to be addressed, it's not only the housing and the water and the drainage, it's also the very human issues, it's the social issues which need our attention. It's the issues of human rights, it's the issues of protection, it's the issues of participation and coordination. These softer issues, if you like, these human issues, are all too easily forgotten in this mad rush to build shelters and dig wells. Sometimes it's all too easy to forget why we're here and who we're here for. That we're actually here not for the government, not for NRC. We're here for the displaced communities of Sri Lanka.